Frank and Yolanda received theirs also.
Okay. Thanks for letting me know that. Appreciate that. So we've just been talking. I've just got the recording started. So we are recording now. This is our second session for our tour to Israel. We've just been talking about the electronic travel authorization and the need to print out your approval and have that with you when we board the airplane. Now, another thing I want to mention to you, just kind of in preparation, is next week when we meet here, we'll be just 1 month away from departure. So we're just a little over a month away. So it's really getting close now. So a word of wisdom: take real good care of your health. Okay.
Today, and I was like,
So
oh.
if you don't normally pay particular attention to it, I get that. We just live our lives from day to day, but just be aware that we're going to be boarding a plane and on a plane for many, many hours. We're going to stop in Frankfurt, Germany for a little layover, and then on our way over to Tel Aviv, Israel. But it's going to be a long flight, and then we'll be with a bunch of people the whole time we're in Israel, traveling all around. You don't want to be sick. You don't want to be sick for yourself because you want to get as much enjoyment and pleasure out of this trip as possible, and you don't want to sick for the benefit of everybody else. So I've had tours where one person was sick, and then it just spread through the whole tour.
Sure.
And everybody ended up getting it. And we've had tours where nobody was sick. So we hope that's the case. Along with that, we will be doing a fair amount of walking at times. So if you can't comfortably walk, say a half a mile, I would just start walking. We've got some wonderful weather this last week or so. So just get out and walk. If you can walk a mile, that'd be even better. But get yourself some good walking shoes. Make sure you have some shoes that are give decent support to your feet and ankles, and they're comfortable to walk in. And because if you're out of shape before we start, well, you'll get in shape during the trip, but it's better to be in shape before we start. Okay. All right. So just a couple of things about health. All right. Last week, I gave you a sheet that had some Hebrew phrases. Have you got those? Okay. How do you say hello in Hebrew?
Shalom.
Shalom. Yeah. Now today, sun is down now. Friday is Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
How do you say hello on the Sabbath?
Shabbat.
Shabbat shalom. Yeah, in fact, all day on Friday you could say Shabbat shalom to somebody, and that would be great. So we talked about please and thank you and you're welcome. All those are great things. We talked about the morning greeting, Boker Tov. Boker Tov, and good evening would be Erev Tov. That's because the word Tov means good. Boker is morning, Erev is evening. So, and then good night is Laila Tov. And you can guess what the word Laila means.
That's nice.
Night. Yeah, right. Okay, good. Sure.
Is the gender issue, they get cranky about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The gender issue is important on some of these. And so all nouns in Hebrew have gender. They're either masculine or feminine. It doesn't necessarily have to do with biological gender, it's grammatical gender. But it corresponds usually. I mean, obviously, words like woman and wife and girl are feminine, and man and husband and boy are masculine. But every noun has gender. And so if you use a noun and you describe it with an adjective, the adjective has to be the right gender to match with it. So it's like a number of languages.
Mm-hmm.
So so that's why the how are you to a woman, to a man are different.
Mm-hmm.
So ma shlomech means how are you to a woman. So it's literally what is your peace? The word ma in Hebrew means what? And we'll be taking a look at that again tonight. And shlomech is shalom, and the ech is a feminine ending. Feminine second person plural, second singular. Ma shlomech. Literally, what is your peace? That means how are you?
Mhm.
Okay. And if you say it to a man, it's ma shalom cha. Ma shalom cha. So, um, so to answer, you say tov. And actually, I should have had this on here. If you're a woman and you want to say how you are, you would say tova. Tova is the feminine well.
Mm.
So tov, tova. So let's see.
Do the I am law.
Oh, I'm lost. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's ne'avadati. Ne'avadati. So yeah. So avad, the middle part of that avad means to be lost or to get lost actually. And the N part on the front of it makes it passive.
Hmm.
It's passive form of the verb. I have gotten lost, literally. Okay. Like that. Ne'avadati. Yeah. Okay, so that's just a few of these. And since we've been talking about some of these Hebrew things, I want to pass this out to everybody. Start them around.
The dark part, you know. What is it? So. That looks to me like St. Marchibald. I know, that's what it looks like. Oh, no, it's CC. Marchibald is CC.
Okay, this is a Hebrew song. I thought it'd be fun for us to learn a Hebrew song and sing it. And it comes from Psalm 133, verse 1. So if you can read Hebrew, you can read the right-hand side. If you can't read, you can look at it on the left-hand side. And translated, Hine ma tov. Now, we just had the word ma, like in ma shalom cha. What did I say ma means? Remember?
How? Is it how? Yes.
Close. Ma means what? Ma means what?
Pete, my,
Or, yeah,
Your
means
piece.
what? And tov we had.
well.
Yeah, well or good. So hine is the way you say behold. So hine ma tov means literally behold, what good, or what good is it, or how good. Hine ma tov, then it gets repeated. So it's how good, and then hine ma tov again a couple of times, and then some la la la's. And then you come down to the second part there, hine ma tov, and then it says uma na'im. Ma na'im. And I wonder if Dominic can tell us what that means.
It's is and how, and then Naim is pleasant.
Yes, na'im is
Mhm.
pleasant. Remember from the book of Ruth, remember Naomi? Naomi, that's what her name means. Naomi, this is na'im. Na'im, Naomi, the same word. And how pleasant. So how good and how pleasant. And then the last line says, Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. You remember? Shevet is sitting, actually. Yashav is to sit. Sitting. Achim is brothers. And then Gam Yachad, indeed, in unity. So Psalm 133:1, yes, is basically saying how good and how pleasant it is when brothers sit together in unity. Okay. So again, here's how you say it. From the top, Hine ma tov. Repeat that with me. Hine ma tov. Okay, and then it's just repeated. And this is la la, it's 10 times, I think. Lai, 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 lai.
You've heard it.
You've heard the song.
Yeah,
So this is a real common.
We used to sing and dance to it.
That's right. Yeah.
Mhm.
And this is a song commonly sung for Sabbath, for Shabbat. Okay, especially for the Shabbat meal, as getting ready for the Sabbath, and you're sitting together. Sung on other occasions too. But that's why it'd be good for us to sing this tonight, as we're all sitting together here on Shabbat evening. And we are all, I think, in unity. And this is very pleasant and good. Hine matov. Now, down here again, hine matov. And then this part is uma na'im. Say that with me. Uma na'im. Now, this part here. Listen carefully. Shevet achim gam yachad. Okay, two of these words have this sound that we don't have in our English, but it is very frequent in Hebrew. It's like, it's aspirated back on the soft palate in the back of your mouth. So, achim and yachad. Yachad is the word which means unity. And achim is brothers. So this again is shevet achim gam yachad. Okay, let's say it with me. Shevet achim gam yachad. Okay, so first time through, I just want you to listen to it. This is how it goes. Okay, you think you got it? All right, we're going to give it a try. All right, along with the singers here. Shevet achim gam yachad. Shevet achim gam yachad. Shevet achim gam yachad. Shevet achim gam yachad. All right, hey, sounds like a whole room full of Hebrews here. Okay, my apologies to the online folks. I meant to share my screen and I forgot to do that, so you could have seen the words. But you got to hear anyway, and hopefully by hearing. So I will go ahead and share my screen at this time. Let's see here. Okay, that's our screen share. I'll put this on screen for the sake of those online, but for those here, let's spread these around.
This is the life.
And Rich, these also. I promised these line maps last time, and I didn't have them last week. Okay, so again, I emailed you, each of you, that booklet on Israel, and we looked at some of the introductory parts in that. We're going to be going back to that in a moment, but in preparation for tonight's lecture, I want to go over these review questions. These are some of the things that we'll be talking about tonight. So we're going to be starting looking at the background of some of the various sites in Israel. And we'll start really by looking at the city of Jaffa. And so some of the places we're going to be looking at. Question number 1, indicate on a map the location of the following. Jaffa. Now, Caesarea Maritima, the correct pronunciation of this, by the way, is Caesarea. Caesarea. But Caesarea Maritima or Caesarea Maritima, then the Sea of Galilee, and then Capernaum. 1, 2, 3, 4 places to be able to locate. Now, we'll be talking about more than 4 places tonight, but those 4 are especially important. Here's another question, question number 2. To which tribe was Jaffa allotted under Joshua? So, you know, when they entered into the promised land under Joshua, the whole land was divided up among 12 tribes. So any place you go in Israel that was allotted originally to a particular tribe. So what about Jaffa? That'll come up in the lecture tonight. Number 3, who imported cedar trees to the harbor in Jaffa? Number 4, who is associated with Jaffa in the New Testament? It's both an Old Testament city and a New Testament city. 5, under the British Mandate, by whom was Jaffa inhabited primarily? We talked about the British Mandate. So after World War I, the land of Palestine was entrusted to the British. They had the mandate for the governance of what was called Palestine at that time. Number 6, who was the builder of Caesarea Maritima? 7, in the New Testament, who was imprisoned for 2 years at Caesarea Maritima? Number 8, what is the elevation of the Sea of Galilee? 9, according to the nun Egeria, who coexisted in Capernaum as late as AD 400. So just pausing here for a moment, in the year 400, who was ruling the land of Israel? Do you remember from last week? This would be the Byzantines. This would be the Byzantines. And the nun Egeria visited the Holy Land and kept a diary of all the places she visited. It's a very interesting reading to see what things were like in her time. Number 10, whose house has been excavated in Capernaum? We'll talk about the city of Capernaum. We'll finish up with Capernaum this evening. 11, who built the first century synagogue in Capernaum? First century, we're talking about first century AD. This is the time when Christ was there, and there was a synagogue there, but who built it? And then the final question, After the first century synagogue was destroyed, when was the next synagogue built? So those are questions for our credit students to keep in mind as they're preparing for the quiz, but for all of us to think about as we're going through tonight's lecture. Okay, so in that booklet that I sent you, you have this map with 32 sites, and they're all listed here. And you'll notice the numbers here are the order in which we're going to be talking about things this evening, starting with Tel Aviv, along with Tel Aviv Jaffa. So you've got an arrow pointing to the location of Tel Aviv here. Caesarea, number 2 here. Talked about Mount Carmel here. Haifa here. Number 5 is, where do I have? Oh, 5, Akko, right across from Haifa. And then 6, Tiberias. 7, the Sea of Galilee. 8, Mount of Beatitudes. 9, Tabgha. 10 is on here somewhere, I think.
Capernaum.
Capernaum, thank you. Where is it? Is it on this slide?
No, it's up on top.
It's up on top. Oh, there it is. Yeah, Capernaum there. And then 11, well, we'll end up with Capernaum tonight. Okay, that's where we're headed tonight. And here you got these locations shown on the map. You've got a little line map that looks something like this, and will help you kind of track along where we're headed. So let me pass over these slides because these are all in Jordan. We're going to start here. And Jaffa. So when we think about Jaffa now, I know what I forgot to do. I forgot to bring my copy of the booklet. That's all right. Well, let me, I've got it on here, I think. Did I open it? I must have it. I'll have to open it. Give me just a moment here. It's here. PowerPoint. Where's my booklet? This way. There we go. So we'll try to go kind of back and forth between this and our slideshow. Okay, so Tel Aviv and Jaffa. These two cities are next door to each other on the coast of Israel. We're going to start by talking about the biblical city of Jaffa. Okay, Jaffa. So it's on the west coast along the Via Maris. The Via Maris is Latin for the way of the sea. So via means way, and maris is the Latin word for sea. And this had to do with a major trade route that basically could come either from Asia Minor to the north, or if you go to the east, you could come from Mesopotamia and join up with this road and then go down towards Egypt. And it took you right through Israel and went alongside the Mediterranean Sea, which is why it's called the Via Maris, the way by the sea, or the way of the sea. And so this major trade route was followed by merchants, by armies, soldiers. It was lots and lots of people went by there, and that is where Jaffa was located. So this made it an important city because there was a port there. Now, it was a man-made port, but it was a port nevertheless. It was a place where ships could come and go. So you could travel overland by the Via Maris and get to Jaffa, and then you could jump onto a boat and go somewhere across the Mediterranean. So it's along the west coast, due east of us, of the city of Aphek. It was given now to the tribe of Dan. The Jaffa was given to the tribe of Dan. Joshua 19 and verse 46. Now, I'll ask a little more difficult question. Was Dan able to conquer Jaffa. Who said it? No, he said no, and that's right. They were not able to conquer Jaffa. And because of that, the tribe of Dan actually migrated to the north and settled way up the north end of Israel. But it was allotted to the tribe of Dan. It became Solomon's harbor for cedar trees from Lebanon, according to 2 Chronicles 2. You remember Solomon built both a magnificent temple magnificent palace for himself, and then he also built the temple that his father David had designed. And to build these things, they needed lots and lots of lumber. Not a lot of big trees grow in Israel. The trees that are suitable for making lumber grow up further north in Lebanon. And so Solomon had trees cut down in Lebanon, Phoenicia, in biblical times, Phoenicia, and then they would float them down the Mediterranean, down to Jaffa. And from there, then they would load them on carts and bring them up by either donkey or horses or oxen, pulling these carts up into the mountains to Jerusalem, where they built the palace and the temple. But that was Jaffa. That was Solomon's harbor for these cedar trees, the cedars of Lebanon. Jonah tried to flee from the presence of the Lord by getting on a ship in Jaffa. Now, in some of your Bibles, you'll see it spelled Joppa, Joppa. It's the same place as Jaffa. And today, in Hebrew, it's actually pronounced Yaffo, Y-A-F-O, Yaffo. It's all the same place. Different ways of pronouncing those syllables and consonants in Hebrew.
Is Jaffa the same place as Tel Aviv, or is it two different places?
They're right next door to each other.
Okay.
They're closer than Reading and Anderson are to each other,
Oh, wow.
but kind of like that, just next door. Yeah. So they're
Okay.
they kind of share a border. It's like if you go to Los Angeles and you start driving, the only way you know you're going from one city to the next is a sign on the side of the road that says you're now entering such and such. So Tel Aviv and Jaffa are next door neighbors. But Teresa?
Is it the same as the,
Okay, good question.
or does one have a capital T? I wasn't sure about that.
Okay, so it's called Tel Aviv. We're going to talk about Tel Aviv. Hold off on your question until we
Okay.
get to Tel Aviv, okay?
Okay.
Because it's an interesting question, it has an interesting answer. Let's stick with Jaffa for a moment, because there was no Tel Aviv in biblical times. In biblical times, Jaffa was the only city there. Okay, so Jonah got on a boat in Jaffa. Point E, Ezra's harbor for cedar trees from Lebanon. Also, Ezra used this to receive cedar trees. So Ezra was involved in rebuilding the temple in his day. Ezra chapter 3, verse 7. Antiochus. This is Antiochus Epiphanes. He was the Greek ruler who desecrated the temple and fought a war against the Jews for several years. As a result of that war, the Jews established Hanukkah. But Antiochus drowned 200 Jews at Jaffa. That's one of the infamous acts that took place there. Coming to the New Testament, in Acts chapter 9, Peter raised Tabitha from the dead. Tabitha, otherwise known as Dorcas. So there was a raising of the dead. And also at Jaffa, Peter was in the home of Simon the tanner. And it was there that Peter received this vision of the sheep being lowered from heaven with all these unclean animals, and God telling, "Rise, Peter, kill and eat." And Peter says, "No, Lord, I'm not going to do that. I've never touched any unclean thing." But God was trying to get through his thick skull that he needs to go to Gentile Cornelius and preach the gospel. He needed this vision. And when we're in Jaffa, I don't know if we'll go to the quote home of Simon the tanner, unquote, or not. There is a traditional site. There's a home there, and they used to open up for tourists. The last few times I've been there, they didn't open up, but nobody knows if that's the actual home or not. So it doesn't really matter to me. But we'll see what we do when we're in Jaffa. Now, during the Byzantine period, the Jewish community suffered periodic massacres. Now, the Byzantines had an interesting relationship with the Jews. There were places, especially further north in the Galilee, where the Byzantine Christians and the Jews lived side by side peacefully and sometimes even were in business together. Further south here, it seems that the relations between the Byzantine Christians and the Jews weren't as good. And the Byzantine Christians had some very obvious anti-Semitic attitudes. So here at Jaffa, there was a massacre. During the Muslim period now, so now we're getting into the 7th century. The 7th century AD, the Muslims coming up from Arabia, Jaffa became the port city for the provincial capital of Ramla, which was one of the provinces established by the Muslim rule. Later, around 1000, during the Crusader period, the Crusaders were also anti-Semitic, very anti-Semitic, more so than even the Byzantines. And the Jewish community there at Jaffa was destroyed under the Crusaders. And as recently as 1799, Napoleon took the city and slaughtered 2,000 POWs. And these POWs consisted of both Arabs and Jews. And Napoleon is an interesting fellow because he actually believed that the Bible predicted that the Jews would one day return to the land of Israel. And he supported a movement of Jews back into the land of Israel. But on this occasion, he was putting these POWs to death. You know, we all know how sane Napoleon was. So as a consequence of putting all these POWs to death, it's interesting, the regiment that was responsible caught leprosy, and all but 7 died. So you reap what you sow. 1820, there was a revival of the Jewish community at Jaffa with the building of a synagogue and a hostel by Isaiah Ajiman of Constantinople. And March 28, 1917, the Turks then expelled the Jews, but the Jews returned after the British conquest. So this is like paradigmatic of the Jewish presence all throughout the Holy Land. Being killed, being expelled, coming back, rebuilding, being expelled again, coming back, rebuilding, settling, back and forth, back and forth, and back and forth. But there was never a time in history that there were no Jews anywhere in the land. They always had a presence in the land of Israel. And then last point here for Jaffa, under the British mandate, it was an Arab city until 1948. So the British had it as an Arab city. 1948, the establishment of the modern state of Israel. And at that time then, the majority of Arabs fled. And what happened in many of these Arab cities, when the Arabs went to war against the Jews in 1947, they started fighting. The Arabs told, the Arab armies told the Arabs citizens that were living in these cities, go ahead and just leave, and we'll take care of all the Jews. We'll kill them, and then you can come back to your homes. So they did. They left. And unfortunately for the Arabs, they weren't successful. Fortunately for the Jews, the Arabs weren't successful. And the Jews won the war. And so those Arabs that left voluntarily at the advice of their Arab leaders didn't have any homes. So this is what happened. So there were a minority of Arabs that did stay in Jaffa, and when the Jews came in, they didn't give them any trouble. They continued to live there. They became citizens of the modern state of Israel. They and their descendants to this day have Israeli passports. They have all the rights as citizens in Israel. They vote in elections. They, just like any other Israeli citizen, contrary to what some people will tell you about Arabs living in Israel today. But this is what happened then in the modern war there at Jaffa. So the question came up about Tel Aviv and the word tel. So Tel Aviv is actually a modern city. Before we get there, let me come back here, show you some pictures of Jaffa. Here's Jaffa from the Mediterranean. And you can see some lovely palm trees. Here's a minaret from a mosque in Jaffa. This is Jaffa from the air. And what you're looking at here, this break here out in the water, is what makes the port of Jaffa. This is very ancient. This stems from the very time of the Old Testament when Solomon brought logs down from Phoenicia. And you can see in here some of the ships. Here's a closer view within of the harbor there. And you can see how peaceful the water is behind that sea break. Now, this is the traditional site of the home of Simon the Tanner, where Peter received his vision. Whether it happened there or not, who knows? But there it is. And now we're going to come to Tel Aviv. Yeah, before we show pictures of Tel Aviv, let me come back to my notes here. It is a new city. Well, that's new in quote marks, 1909. So that may not seem new to Americans. That's like ancient history to us. But in the land of Israel, that's very recent. So prior to 1900, there was nothing there but sand dunes. And some of the Jews who were coming into the land of Israel in the Aliyah movement. Aliyah means going up, and it's a word that's used to describe immigration into Israel of Jews coming back to their land, Aliyah. So in around 1900, they were looking for a place to settle, and somebody thought this would be a good site. There's nothing here but sand dunes. Let's build a city, and they did. And it was they were looking for a name. Well, how do you name a modern city? You can't give it a name of any city in the Bible because they're already there. So what they did is they found the name of a city that's mentioned in the book of Jeremiah, where Jews who were exiled to Babylon were staying. It's the only place in the Bible where the word Tel Aviv occurs, is in the book of Jeremiah. So in Babylon, there is a place called Tel Aviv, and it may in fact be a tel, one of these places that has multiple layers built up. But the one in Israel isn't a tel. It's just named after that location in Babylon. So that's why the word tel occurs here. So Tel Aviv. And so they built this city, and it became a modern city. It's got modern skyscrapers, beautiful beaches, nice modern hotels, comfortable coffee shops. It's really a wonderful city, but a very, very modern city, and a very secular city, by the way. And I'll have something else to say about that when we talk about Haifa. But it was once the largest city in modern Israel. During the very early days of the state, it was the seat of government of Israel, because they didn't yet have Jerusalem. In the War of 1948, Israel managed to get Western Jerusalem, and as early as 1949, they moved the seat of government to Western Jerusalem. And in Western Jerusalem, they built their government called the Knesset, is the Israeli parliament. And the word is Knesset. But since it had started out at Tel Aviv, most nations in the world refused to acknowledge Israel's right to Jerusalem, and they would only have their embassies in Tel Aviv. And it wasn't until for America, President Trump's first term, that the American embassy was finally moved to Jerusalem. And there it is today. And there are still lots of countries that only have an embassy in Tel Aviv. because they refused to acknowledge Israel's right to the city of Jerusalem. It's so contested whether it belongs to Israel or whether it belongs to the Palestinians. But more and more nations are starting to follow suit. Many more are opening some kind of official offices in Jerusalem. So, but it once was the largest city. Now it's the second largest city. There are three really big major cities in Israel: Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and Haifa, which we'll talk about shortly. Okay, so that's Tel Aviv. And so since it doesn't really occur in the Bible, there's not much to say about it. So we're going to go on in a moment, but here are some pictures of Tel Aviv. You can see here's this modern city here, all these hotels along the beach, and people down enjoying the beach. It's beautiful. It's a wonderful place to go sunbathe or play volleyball on the beach, or go wading, whatever. Here's another aerial picture of the city of Tel Aviv. It's really a huge city. The airport is just outside of Tel Aviv. So when we come into Israel, the first thing you'll see is the city of Tel Aviv. We kind of fly right over it as we come in for a landing at Ben Gurion International Airport. Now, we want to go to Caesarea, or Caesarea, as I like to call it, named after the Caesars. And the Latin word for Caesar is actually pronounced Kaiser, which is where later in history the Germans will name their rulers the Kaisers. So we all know about Kaiser Wilhelm, his association with World War I. But the Kaisers in Germany were naming themselves after the Holy Roman Emperors of the Holy Roman Empire. So Caesarea, here it is. It was built by Herod the Great. So it's not an Old Testament city at all. Herod the Great, he rules from about 30 BC to I think AD like 6, around in there. So he built this city out of, there wasn't anything there before. Again, kind of like Tel Aviv in modern times. He just said, this looks like a good place for a city. And so he built it in honor of August Caesar, Caesar Augustus. And that's why it's named Caesarea, after Augustus Caesar. And it's called Caesarea Maritima. Maritima means by the seaside, because there's a second Caesarea. The second Caesarea is up at the northern border of Israel, right next door to Lebanon. And we'll talk about that in another lecture. But here, this one was built by Herod the Great, the same one who tried to slay the baby Jesus. It became the Roman and Byzantine capital of Judea, and all Roman procurators made their headquarters in Caesarea. Pilate was the one that condemned Jesus to death, but Pilate's home was actually here, Caesarea. He was simply traveled up to Jerusalem because of the Feast of Passover. He had to keep an eye on things, make sure that the rebellion didn't start. That's why he was in Jerusalem at that time. But all the Roman procurators made their home in Caesarea. Number 3, there is a Herodian aqueduct that brought water from the Shuni spring and from Nahal Tananim at Mount Carmel. So if you have your line map drawing, Carmel is where you have this little bump on the coastline, and Caesarea is way down here. There was no water source for Caesarea. How do you build a city if you don't have water? Well, you've got to import water. And Herod built this miles-long aqueduct to bring water all the way down from Mount Carmel to the city of Caesarea. And that aqueduct you can still see today. I'll show you some pictures of it in just a few moments. But it's really quite an amazing part of ancient Roman engineering. And the Romans were brilliant at constructing aqueducts and water courses. Number 4, Hadrian. Hadrian is now 120 to the late 130s AD. Hadrian, there's a wall of Hadrian in England, right? Same Hadrian. So Hadrian, the emperor, had a second aqueduct built alongside the Herodian to increase the water supply. And there are places where you can see both of these aqueducts. Number 5, Caesarea was the home of Philip the Evangelist. And we can read about that in Acts 8:40, Acts 21:8. And it was in Acts 21 that Philip actually predicted the arrest of Paul in Jerusalem. Number 6, Paul stopped in Caesarea on his way to Tarsus. Acts 9. Acts 9, Paul gets saved on the road to Damascus. He ministers for a while in Damascus, and then he returns to his home, and on his way home, he stopped in Caesarea. Acts 9:30. Number 7, Cornelius and his household were the first Gentiles to receive the gospel. Cornelius lived there at Caesarea. So we just looked at Jaffa. That's where Peter got his vision. And he was told to go with these Gentile men up to Caesarea to preach the gospel. So that's where he went. And we'll look at some pictures of Caesarea in just a moment. So the first Gentiles to receive the gospel were there. Number 8, Herod Agrippa I died in Caesarea. Acts 12:19 through 23. That's where you read about the worms devouring his body. Number 9, Paul stopped there again on his way to Jerusalem in Acts 18. This was between the second and third missionary journeys. As Paul was making his way up to Jerusalem, he stopped in Caesarea on the way. Paul stayed in Philip's home in Caesarea, Acts 21:8 through 16. I mentioned the fact that Philip had prophesied the arrest of Paul. This is where it happened. It's when he stayed in Philip's home right there. Paul was then imprisoned in Caesarea for 2 years. So he goes up to Jerusalem. He there is arrested in the temple square and taken into the headquarters there at the corner of the Temple Mount Square. And then for safekeeping, because there was a plot against Paul's life, he was taken down to Caesarea. And he remained there in prison for 2 years. And he appeared while he was in prison there before Felix, Festus, and Agrippa. In AD 60, now we're getting on towards the latter part of the New Testament period, several Jews in Caesarea were killed by the Romans. And this is one of the things that sparked the Jewish revolt against Rome. Tensions had been building for some time, but this was almost like the straw that broke the camel's back. This really set the Jews on fire. So that was AD 60. The last books of the New Testament, if we discount the writings of John, the last books of the New Testament are the late 60s. And then John writes in the 90s, his gospel and epistles and Revelation. So this is getting towards really the end of the apostolic era when this happened. Then in AD 66, 20,000 Jews were killed in one day at Caesarea. And this is what really got the Jewish revolt off to a blazing start. So there was this big revolt. It will end in 70 to 71 with the destruction of the temple and then the Jewish siege of Masada. But it all starts here at Caesarea. AD 60, okay, 66, we did that. Number 14, in AD 70, the same year that the temple was destroyed, 2,500 Jewish POWs were made to fight wild beasts in Caesarea. So this, of course, was later was a form of persecution and putting to death of Christians. Christians were made to face the wild beasts in the arenas, but it was used against the Jews at this point. That was in 70. Now, Caesarea was also a base for two of the early church fathers. If you study early church history, these names will be familiar to you, Eusebius and Origen. So Eusebius is known as the father of church history. He wrote the first history of the Christian church in his day. And Origen was active in Alexandria, Egypt, but later he came and made Caesarea his base of operations. 639, it was conquered by the Muslims. 1101, it was conquered by the Crusader King Baldwin. 1187, it was conquered by the Muslim Saladin. 1191, it was reconquered by the Crusaders. This is going back and forth, back and forth. Christian, Muslim, Christian, Muslim. 1291, it was conquered by the Sultan Berbers, and it gradually declined after that. It would go all the way to the late 19th century, and Jewish immigrants from Bosnia, is part of the Aliyah again, Jews returning from dispersion from the diaspora. They settled here. They founded a village at ancient Caesarea. Today, there's quite a nice city there. In fact, the Prime Minister of Israel, Bibi Netanyahu, has a home in Caesarea. There's some very expensive homes there. They're very nice golf course. But the ruins there are fascinating to see. Let me show you a few pictures of Caesarea. Here's Caesarea from the air. This that you see jutting out into the sea right here is all man-made. That was made to form a harbor in this region where ships could come in, and it was designed by Herod the Great, who was a master builder. He built the harbor in such a way that the tidal flow would come in and actually carry away the silt. And so it's amazing. So the Herods are known for connection with Caesarea. It can be known as the city of four P's. We have Pilate, who sentenced Jesus to death, at his home there. Philip, we talked about him, Philip the Evangelist. Paul, imprisoned there for 2 years, visited there a couple of other times. And Peter. Peter went there to share the gospel with Cornelius. So four P's associated with Caesarea. There was a temple dedicated to Augustus Caesar. This is what remains of it today, but you can see the remains of some walls and some inner walls and rooms and so forth. This has been widely excavated. This is all open to the public. You can walk through here and see a lot of this. And the ancient amphitheater that was at Caesarea has all been excavated. Not too many years ago. This was all completely covered in sand, and you couldn't see it at all. So it's all been excavated. It's now being used for performances even today. So here's a closer look at the amphitheater. Here's one of our tour groups there on the steps with our tour guide. And it's a wonderful place to visit. You really imagine, and possibly Paul maybe even gave his talk to Agrippa here in this amphitheater. Here's the aqueduct we were talking about that Herod the Great built to bring water all the way down from Mount Carmel. You can get up there and walk on it. You can look through it. Here's some of our tour members, some of the girls from the Bible College, posing for a picture with the Mediterranean in the background. And discovered here in 1961 was the first ever extra biblical reference to Pilate. And there is an inscription on this stone here that says in Latin, Tiberium Pontius Pilatus, Praefectus Judea. So to Tiberius Caesar from Pontius Pilate, Prefect of Judea is what that means. So this is the name Tiberium right there. Right here, second line, Pilatus. And there's a closer look at Tiberium Pilatus in Latin. Okay, so that's Caesarea. Now, Mount Carmel, we have mentioned. Mount Carmel on your map is that little bump that sticks out into the Mediterranean along the coastline. And it forms the only natural bay along Israel's coastline. It's because this mountain juts out into the Mediterranean. The name Carmel is actually pronounced Kerem El. Kerem is the Hebrew word for a vineyard. And El, of course, is the name of God. Most of us are more familiar with the plural form of it, Elohim. But the singular form is El. El means God. Kerem El, the vineyard of God. And so it sounds like the candy, caramel. In fact, when my daughter Charity went on tour to Israel with us, she brought a package of caramels with her, just so she could hand them out to everybody when we were on Mount Carmel. That was kind of fun, yeah.
Carmel here in California point juts out also. Is that why they?
It does, and I think it's named after this Mount Carmel. I'm not sure about that, but I think it is. And there are a lot of place names in America that are named after biblical places, aren't there? So it reminds me, I was gonna say this when we were talking about Tel Aviv. Okay, they named Tel Aviv after the name of a city in another place. So think of how many places in America are named like Salem. Got lots of Salems. That's the name of Jerusalem. Carmel might be another one. Bethlehem. How many Bethlehems are there in America? Lots of Bethlehems. Yeah. So that's what was going on with Tel Aviv. They were trying to name it, and they knew the name of a city that was connected with their forebears, and they used that name. So Carmel might be where Carmel in California gets its name. I suspect that's the case, but I haven't proven that.
So does this solve that age-old argument about how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Carmel or caramel?
Yeah. See, I don't think it's related at all to the candy, but so I guess that wouldn't solve it. But you could try to make that argument. Kerem El. So it interrupts Israel's Mediterranean coast and creates the Bay of Haifa. So to the north of that jutting out there, you have then a bay. It's kind of a wide open bay. It's not very well protected, but it is a bay. It's the only natural bay. The top of Mount Carmel is 1,810 feet above sea level. The bottom of it, of course, is right at sea level. And so it rises up 1,800 feet. So it's fairly high. Mount Carmel was taken by Joshua in Joshua 12:22, and it was allotted to the tribe of Asher. Tribe of Asher. You don't read much about Asher in the Bible, but they were given Mount Carmel. Mount Carmel was also the site of the contest between Elijah and the prophets of Baal or Baal that you read about in 1 Kings 18, where you remember they were trying to call down fire, and the prophets of Baal danced and chanted and cut themselves, and nothing happened. And Elijah doused his offering in water, and he just prayed a quiet prayer, and God sent down fire from heaven. That took place on Mount Carmel. And there's a monastery on Carmel that is dedicated to that site. And it is where a certain order of Catholic monks called the Carmelites are associated with that location. That's where they get their name. Bir el Muhraka nearby may have provided water for the sacrifice. Remember when Elijah did all that dousing of his sacrifice with all that water, it was during this long drought. So where did the water come from? Okay, well, there's a spring nearby. And the name of that spring is Bir el Muhraka. Elisha stayed at Mount Carmel, according to 2 Kings 2. Mount Carmel is mentioned in the Song of Solomon, Song of Solomon 7:5. Many mentions in the prophets, and here's a list of them. We're not going to look at all of them or even talk about all of them, but Mount Carmel was very well known. It's a very, very prominent location. In 107 BC, Mount Carmel was taken by the sons of John Hyrcanus. Now, John Hyrcanus, who was he? John Hyrcanus was one of the descendants of the Maccabees. Remember, we talked about the Maccabees, and their descendants became priest kings in Israel in the intertestamental period. And John Hyrcanus was one of them. So in 107 BC, he took Mount Carmel. And Mount Carmel has caves, and in some of these caves, remains of Neanderthal humans have been discovered. Okay, that's Mount Carmel. What's Mount Carmel look like? Here it is from the south, looking northward, and you can see it rising abruptly. And then going from the north, what you're looking at, the water you're looking at here is the Bay of Haifa. So looking across the Bay of Haifa down at the mountain, it comes up from the sea, rather steep, and it continues up, and it continues off of the slide, rising even further. When you get up into the mountain itself, it's got canyons and brush. Not any real tall trees, or at least not many tall trees, but more like chaparral and brush and that sort of thing. There are some trees that have been planted. There's some nice forests up there now. Here's the traditional site of Elijah's contest with the prophets of Baal up on this mountaintop here. That's within. Mount Carmel is actually a mountain range. It's not one mountain that comes up. It's a range that sticks out into the Mediterranean. And here's at that Carmelite monastery. This is my son David back in the days when he had long hair. And here's a statue of Elijah. So we come to Haifa. So Haifa is a city on the coast. And we talked about the Bay of Haifa being formed by Mount Carmel. And we're not going to say a lot about Haifa. We may or may not stop at Haifa. It's no reference to it in the Bible. It's not really a biblical town. It's a modern town. But it's the only natural port on the Mediterranean coast. So we saw Jaffa with man-made port. We looked at Caesarea or Caesarea with its man-made port. But there's a natural port here formed by this bay. And it's a major port today. American fleets are known sometimes to weigh anchor at the Haifa port and then have leave there in Israel. So there are no references to the city in the Bible. The present city began under Sheikh Dahar al-Omar, who built a castle there in 1761. So it has a reputation. And here we come back to these three major cities of Israel. And you hear this saying, while Jerusalem prays, Tel Aviv plays, Haifa works. So Jerusalem is the holy city, and it's known for prayer. Tel Aviv is your modern secular city. That's where everybody goes to play. And Haifa is an industrial city. And so Haifa works. And Haifa actually reminds me a lot of San Francisco. So it's a port like San Francisco. It's got a lot of industry like San Francisco. And it's built on a hillside. And so you've got these very steep roads running up into Haifa from the sea, very much like San Francisco. And it's also the primary center of Baha'i worship. So the Baha'i faith is a kind of a universalistic faith. They believe in kind of peace and acceptance of everybody, and all religions lead to the same way. They have a big temple there in Haifa. It's beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful structures in the world. Absolutely gorgeous gardens all around it. If we go to Haifa, we'll take a look at that temple, but it'll all depend on how our time goes. We may or may not stop at Haifa. It really has no biblical significance at all. But across the bay from Haifa to the north is the city of Akko, which is a biblical city. So let's see, I think I have a few pictures of Haifa. Here's Haifa, looking at it, an aerial view from the bay. Here's up at the top, looking down. You see over here on the bottom left-hand corner, this dome? That's that Baha'i temple I was telling you about. And here's all these, so you can see these very steep roads running up to this spot here, and the port down below.
So are they the same Baha'i we have here? I mean, there's one in Reading.
You say the same thing.
Okay.
But this is one of their major centers. Is actually in Israel. Yeah, and this is the picture of the temple, and the gardens are just absolutely gorgeous.
Would the all the excavation for gas fields, things like that, be out of Akko?
Okay, so the major gas fields that have been discovered just recently in Israel are not in Haifa. They're further offshore. And, well, a little further north. And there's a dispute with Lebanon about one of those, about who has the rights to it. But it's almost certainly, if you take a line perpendicular to the sea coast at the border boundary between Israel and Lebanon, it goes out, kind of doesn't go straight west, but it goes a little north, and then it puts all of those gas fields in Israel's territory. But Lebanon is saying, no, they belong to us. So if you make that line go straight west, it cuts right through the middle of those gas fields. So it's a big political discussion about where is the boundary between Israel and Jordan, or Israel and Lebanon, once you get out into the Mediterranean. But the pipes coming in, I think, would come in at Haifa, piping it in from those fields. Okay, so Akko. Akko is also called Acre, or some people pronounce it Acre, and it's also called Ptolemais. Those are three names for the same city. And it is a biblical city. It's on the north side of the Bay of Haifa. It was allotted to Asher, but Asher failed to conquer it. Judges 131. Akko was given by Solomon to Hiram, the king of Tyre. Remember, Hiram was a great friend of King David and gave cedar logs to David, and later to Solomon. And in return for his favor, Solomon gave him the city of Akko. 1 Kings 9. It was renamed Ptolemais during the Hellenistic period after Ptolemy. Okay, Hellenistic period. We talked about that last time. What are we talking about when we say the Hellenistic period?
And the Greeks were in control.
Yeah, the Greeks were in control. This is the intertestamental period. Okay, so remember, during the captivity, Babylonian captivity, you have Babylon in control. Babylon is conquered by the Medes and the Persians. So the Persians are in control into the intertestamental period. The Persians are overthrown by the Greeks, Alexander the Great. It's all happening between the testaments. That's the Hellenistic period, when these Hellenes, these Greeks, are in control. And that intertestamental period then will come to an end when the Romans conquer the Greeks. So Hellenistic period is all in between the two testaments. You have some prophecies about the Greeks in the Old Testament, but by the time the New Testament comes, the Greeks are long and forgotten. Okay, but it was renamed Ptolemais, which is a Greek word, referring to the Ptolemies. Ptolemy was one of the four generals of Alexander the Great. So it was renamed after Ptolemy. Jonathan Maccabee was executed in Akko. Okay, back to the Maccabees. The Maccabees were the ones that conquered the Greeks, but Jonathan was captured and executed there. According to Acts 21, Paul spent one day at Akko. Okay, he was on his way.
15 minutes of fame.
Yeah, yep. He was on his way somewhere else. He was going up to Jerusalem, and he stopped there and spent the night. Now, AD 66, again, towards the end of the New Testament period, Akko was sacked by the Jews in reprisal for the slaughter of the Jews at Caesarea. We talked about the slaughter of those Jews at Caesarea. So the Jews are going to get revenge against the Romans. And they did that here. They sacked the city of Akko. And this was another part of the beginning of the Jewish revolt. Now, AD 636, 7th century, Akko was conquered by the Muslims. 1100, conquered by the Crusaders. Sound like an old story now?
Back and forth.
Okay. Under Baldwin, by whom it was reputed to have been renamed Saint Jean d'Arc, which gives it the name Acre, Joan of Arc. So Akko is close enough to Acre that those names were easily applied. So it comes to be named after Joan of Arc, but only by the time of the Crusaders. It's already known as Akko long before that. Number 9, after the fall of Jerusalem to the Arabs, Akko became the capital of the Crusader kingdom. And the Crusaders actually had this magnificent underground city with all kinds of huge vaulted rooms with magnificent arches. It was only excavated in fairly recent times. And I don't think we're going to visit it on our tour, but it's an amazing place to visit. And then they had escape routes, tunnels leading out to the sea in case they ever were threatened with conquer. And they actually had to use those when they were overthrown by the Muslims. So, which brings us to 1187. And in late 1187, it was conquered by the Muslim Saladin. 1191, it was reconquered by the Crusaders again. Okay, same old story. Under Richard the Lionheart, and you hear about him oftentimes in our histories of England. And Philip Augustus of France, and reinstated as the capital of the Crusader kingdom. 1291, it fell to Sultan Khalil el-Ashraf, who was a Mamluk. And out of 12,000 knights in the city, only 7 survived.
Whoa.
Yeah. So the city lay in ruins for 4.5 centuries. Finally, in 1749, it was rebuilt by the Bedouin sheikh Dahar el-Omar. During the British Mandate, that was used as a prison for many Jewish freedom fighters. 1947, okay, just when the Jews are starting to regain their land, the UN has voted to give the land to the Jews, actually to partition it between the Jews and the Arabs. Jewish commandos breached the wall of the fortress and freed the Jewish prisoners who were being held there. In 1948, one of 3 strategic cities of Galilee that fell to Jewish forces was Akko. Okay. And when we come back from our break, because I need to give my voice a little rest and time, we're going to talk about Tiberias. But before we do that, let's take a look at some pictures of Akko. So there's a wide bay, like we said. They have built walls out into the bay to make it easier to park your ships in there. But you can see there's still some pretty good waves even coming in, even with this sea break. But this is the city. Here it is from the outside. So built right up to the sea, with these walls to keep the breakers away. And here's that underground city I was telling you about, those magnificent arches to support these things. What happened in recent times was, there was an Arab city there, And somebody noticed there were little holes in the ground, various places. And for years, the Arabs found those real convenient to throw the trash down.
Oh, shoot. How handy.
So when they finally discovered it, they had to haul all this ancient trash out, and they excavated the entire underground city. Okay, we're going to come back and talk about Tiberius. Somebody goes there, and there's Tiberius. Any questions before we break?
A lot of information.
A lot of information.
Mhm.
So a lot of interesting information. You get a feel for what happened in the past and on up to the present. Okay, we're going to break let's take a 10-minute break. It's 7:25 now. We'll come back promptly at 7:35.
Took the girls to see David. Did you? And this, yeah, but it was like, you know, everything that we had talked about last week.
Oh, really?
The air, you know, just where. And so after we got home, I took my map out and showed Kimberly where ground was going. You know, this is it. This is still there. They stayed pretty darn close to biblical history. Yeah. Yeah. And I wondered how they were going to handle where David cuts off the corner of Saul's robe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because he was in there. And I told Kimberly that after when she was cracking up. You know, they just showed him. It was really, really hot. And he said, I am about to get out of this sun and rest. So he goes into the cool cave. And when he leaves, then David comes running out with the corner of his robe. And so that was, they did good. I liked it. And one of Cece's grandkids was 12. He was not amused. He's too old for it. Lachlan was a little too young.
I was gonna say, she's
Yeah,
a little young
yeah.
for a movie
Yeah.
theater
to
to sit there.
sit, yeah,
Yeah.
catch what was happening. So, you know, I mean, she got up and watched 30 minutes of Paw Patrol today, and she was disappeared halfway through it. So, yeah,
We still watch Bluey.
oh gosh.
We love Bluey.
Trevor and Eric both say Bluey is the first place to go if you think you're being a good parent, because you're not. Bluey will prove it to you. I'm gonna look at that.
I just love the way that the dad plays with the kids.
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
you know,
I love
well,
it.
and he talks to them. And
Yeah.
he apparently doesn't work. He talks about going to work, but he's home all the time with
Yeah,
kids.
yeah.
Yeah, Rick and Trevor were cracking up about that.
How's Trevor doing?
He said,
Because he became a seed kid.
well, no, he does. That's all worked out really well.
Oh,
He
okay.
can't afford to live.
Yeah.
And he said, you know, I applied for a job at Walmart. And I said, is that going to work out timing, you know, time-wise? And he said, I just applied. I don't know. He said, because it's to the point where I either get a, you know, job that pays better, or I move to sleep in the truck with my kids, or move to Idaho without my kids. Hi. What is your name?
I'm Linda.
Linda. Are you?
She gave me a ride.
Gotcha. Okay.
Oh, we
Okay.
were related.
Okay. Okay. I'm Teresa. This is my friend Debbie.
Lisa.
Yeah,
Nice
yeah.
to meet you both.
I just recently, like a couple of weeks ago, decided I was going. She's been planning for
For
a year.
for over a year, yeah.
Oh, great. Yes, yes.
I was so excited when she emailed that she
Oh,
was going.
uh,
Oh, my
You've
God.
been friends a long time.
We have,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
we've traveled together before, and we know how to do that. So, yeah.
Oh, thank you.
And that was one of the reasons I I wanted that this was perfect
Yeah.
because, you know, you never know. And we already had that established. And when else are you going to be able to go and go with a buddy and
Yeah, and go with
Mhm. people that,
Somebody
yes,
so
yeah,
knowledgeable.
yeah, that's going to be something.
Awesome.
So much information. I will never remember all that.
No.
Oh, yeah.
It's a
No.
good thing I'm not getting tested on it.
Yeah,
because I would never remember.
no,
But it's interesting to see all the
Mm.
centuries of.
the interconnection.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, that's because it's real.
Yeah.
That's why. I sat today for probably an hour and a half and just read over every one of these and read over what we
You
had
did?
yesterday.
Oh, my
Yeah.
goodness. Look
Yeah.
at you. What a good little
Um,
pupil.
Give it
This,
out.
he emailed this out,
Yeah,
right?
he emailed.
Yeah. Do you have a way to print?
I should probably do that.
Okay.
I was out of my-
Yeah, ask him to send it to you. It's the,
It's probably on there. Just.
oh, okay. Oh, probably, yeah. And this is for the students,
Oh,
but we get to take advantage of, you know, the fact that.
Learning some
Mhm.
of it. I'll
Mhm. Yeah.
That's great.
Mhm.
Good. What's that? Teresa?
And Debbie.
Mhm.
And your
Linda,
name?
Linda.
Linda. Linda.
Okay.
Yeah, great.
Mhm.
And Richard.
Hannah.
Mhm.
Richard's got the KBIP before.
Are you coming?
He looks familiar, and I think he
Mhm.
Bill worked on the one.
Mhm. I believe he speaks that thing. I know I have seen him.
Oh,
Maybe that's why.
Yeah.
Richard, have you come into KVIP before and talked with Phil Morrow?
Yeah.
I thought I recognized you. I don't remember what the case, what it was about. Did you go on air or did you interview?
One of the times when I was doing
Oh, you did Sherathon.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm so sorry. I kept thinking, I know I've seen him. I know he's come in there.
And I got the same thing. He looks so familiar, yeah.
But she doesn't.
I don't know
come
the
into
KVIP, so, yeah,
so
yeah.
She must have seen you somewhere
Yeah.
else.
You're on the board of PGIP.
Mhm.
Mhm. Comes and signs checks for me.
I'm a good friend of Phil's brother Jeff.
Ah,
He
okay.
lives just on the backside of the property.
Yes, yeah. He's going through some rough.
Hey, Dr. Gunn,
Yeah,
are we going to have church services or anything on the Sunday we're there?
we'll try. I have to, we've had some switches with tour guides. So we'll have an Israeli tour guide. The guy that I thought was going to be our tour guide found out that he had double booked those dates. So in fact, I just learned yesterday or today who our tour guide's going to be, and I'm trying to get to know him. So we'll see how it goes. Yeah, we will definitely have a church service of sorts. We'll stop on the Lord's Day and have church service. Well, you want to preach?
No answer.
I'll listen. I'll listen to you.
Yeah, I thought he had muted himself. They not like us.
They love us.
They do. Is that because we financially
Mhm.
support the?
Yeah, Israel is really, really super dependent on tourism.
Mm.
They also love us because modern Israelis have learned that evangelical Christians are their best friends in the world.
Mhm.
It hasn't always been that way. When I first went to Israel in the 1980s, the 80s or 90s? 80s.
84.
84.
Right.
It wasn't so much that way.
Mhm.
And because there's this ages-long conflict between Jews and Christians.
Mhm.
And so, in fact, I had a pastor friend. Well, he was actually a teacher from Los Angeles Baptist College who had gone over to Israel, and he was running an extension of Los Angeles Baptist College at a kibbutz on the Sea of Galilee. He made a really interesting comment to me one day. He said, he said, here in Israel, if I tell people I'm a Christian, they don't want to hear anything from me. But he said, if I tell them I'm a Baptist, they don't know what that is, and they're real curious. And he says, so I have a
You
real
can
open
talk.
door to talk to them about the Lord.
That's kind of funny.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah. Now, I follow a girl on Facebook who is an Orthodox Jew.
Okay.
And I don't know why I follow her because she talks about, the laws, and I just want to say, oh, honey, you don't have to do that. But it's been very interesting, but she flat out says Jesus was just a guy. And
Yeah.
it's very interesting. And they follow all of the nonsense rules,
Yeah, and it's not just the law for an Orthodox Jew, it's the rabbinic traditions.
Yes, yeah.
So the Talmud,
Mhm.
the Mishnah.
Mhm.
So all of that is equal authority with Scripture. In fact, they study that more than they study the
Yes.
Bible even.
She has said that.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, just weird things like they have two kitchens.
Mhm.
So when you go to sell that house, you have to sell it to another Orthodox Jew.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's odd. And
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah. Two kitchens because in kosher,
Dairy.
dairy and meat can't touch, can't mix. So, yeah. All right. Well, it's time for us to get started up again. So welcome back, everybody. And we'll share my screen again.
You whip back there.
Okay, we left off with this slide and the city of Tiberias. Tiberias is on the Sea of Galilee. So we've been going up the coast of the Mediterranean up to this point. Now we're coming inland, the Sea of Galilee. We talked about the Sea of Galilee as last week as being in the Jordan River. The Sea of Galilee is basically it's a bulge in the Jordan River. So you have north of the Sea of Galilee, you've got the upper Jordan. South of the Sea of Galilee, you've got the lower Jordan. On that body of water, the Sea of Galilee, is a city called Tiberias. Now, the town itself is only mentioned once in the Bible. That's in John 6:23. And it makes reference to the city of Tiberias. But the Sea of Galilee is twice called the Sea of Tiberias. So Tiberias was an important enough city that the Sea of Galilee goes by the name of that city, Sea of Tiberias. Tiberias was built by Herod Antipas. Is it getting cold in here?
Yeah.
Anybody? How many people are cold? Okay. That's enough. Well, I'll move on to it. I turned it off because it was a little warm when we first started.
We could just shut the door.
Yeah. Do that. It's cold out there at the hallway.
We could run around.
There you go.
Heart zone or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was built by Herod Antipas in AD 20. Herod Antipas was one of the sons of Herod the Great. And it was built in honor of Caesar or Kaiser Tiberius. So it's named after one of the Roman Caesars, Kaiser Tiberius. In New Testament times, it was a completely Gentile town, which might be why it doesn't get mentioned very much. Okay, there were no Jews living in Tiberias. The Sanhedrin, which is the kind of the religious council of the Jews, the Sanhedrin moved to Tiberias after the failed Bar Kokhba revolt and the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 132. Now, try to keep this in your mind. When we talk about the Jewish revolt against the Romans, there were two of them. Okay, one is associated with the destruction of the temple in AD 70 and their last stand at Masada. That's the first Jewish revolt, okay, around AD 70 to 72. Then in the 2nd century, around 130, there is a second Jewish revolt against Rome. And that second Jewish revolt was led by a man named Bar Kokhba. Bar Kokhba is Aramaic, meaning a son of the stars. And Bar Kokhba thought that God would give the Jews a great victory like he had done for the Maccabees. And he led this guerrilla warfare against the Romans. That's what's being referred to here. So the Bar Kokhba rebellion failed. And this is also, we mentioned Hadrian. Hadrian was the one who ended up conquering the Jews in that Bar Kokhba rebellion. So at this time, the Sanhedrin then, who had been in Jerusalem, moved to Tiberias. The Jews were not allowed to remain in Jerusalem. So they moved northward to Tiberias, and this formerly Gentile city became a center of Jewish influence and learning. Number 6, it became the chief seat of Jewish learning. Both the Mishnah and the Palestinian Talmud were compiled at Tiberias. So again, Teresa, your friend who's an Orthodox Jew, the Mishnah and the Talmud, very important to her.
That's what she read too.
Okay, so these were compiled during the 3rd and the 5th centuries. Now, let me just pause and make a comment here about this. Today, there's several movements within Christianity to try to get back to Hebrew roots. And they say that Christianity has its roots in Judaism, and they believe that if you're to understand Christianity correctly, you have to understand its Hebrew roots. There's a big problem with this movement, and the problem is that they're drawing their understanding of Judaism from the Talmud and the Mishnah. And these didn't even come about till 3rd to 5th century. We're talking about hundreds of years after the New Testament times. So the Judaism represented by these sources is not the same as what we would call Second Temple Judaism. Similar in some respects, but different in many respects. So, like we said a moment ago, the Orthodox Jews of today actually study the Talmud and the Mishnah much more than they study the Bible. That's really they believe it is the preservation of what's known as the oral law.
Right.
So what they say is that when Moses received the law on Mount Sinai, there were two laws. There was the written law and the oral law. And the oral law was the interpretation of the written law. And so what they say is that from generation to generation to generation, this oral law was passed on from father to son, father to son, father to son, father to son. And so they knew what the written law meant because they had this oral interpretation of it. After the destruction of Jerusalem, and when Hadrian cast the Jews out, they finally said, look, since we're all being dispersed and everything is helter-skelter, there's no center of Judaism anymore, we need to write down the oral law. So this is where the Mishnah and the Talmud come from. It is a writing down what they believed had been passed down orally ever since Mount Sinai. So, and for a number of reasons, there are significant changes that took place in what's broadly known as Rabbinic Judaism, as opposed to what we would call Second Temple Judaism. Second Temple Judaism would be the Judaism practiced by Jews at the time that Jesus was on the earth. Anyways, there's a lot more we
It's
can say about that. but
traditions
yeah.
more than
Mhm.
law.
Mhm.
Is that, I thought that was the Mishnah.
It is, yeah,
Okay,
Mishnah,
okay,
traditions.
The traditions, okay.
And what interests me is that what did Jesus criticize about the Pharisees more than anything else? Was their traditions. And this is what the Hebrew Roots movement wants to do, is to tie us in with the traditions that are preserved in the Mishnah, Talmud, all of that. Okay, so but that's another topic for another day. Point 7, Tiberias was destroyed in 748 by a series of earthquakes. It was rebuilt by the Crusaders and became the capital of Galilee. It was destroyed by the Arabs in the 12th century, rebuilt by the Jews in the 1740s and 1750s under the Sephardic rabbi Abu Lathia. Remember, we talked about the Sephardic Jews and the Ashkenazi Jews. This was a Sephardic Jew who rebuilt the city of Tiberias at that time. The Hasids, you hear about the Hasidic Jews. These are ultra-Orthodox Jews from Eastern Europe. Came from Europe in 1777. The city was destroyed by an earthquake again in 1837 and then rebuilt right away by the Jews who were there. And today, Tiberias is the burial place of many of the leading Jewish rabbis. Okay. Now let's move on and talk about the Sea of Galilee. Let me show some pictures of Tiberias first. By the way, we're going to be staying in Tiberias. When we're up in that area, our hotel is located in Tiberias. So here's a picture of it on the right-hand side of the screen. You can see the Sea of Galilee. And from Tiberias, we will also take a boat ride out on the Sea of Galilee. And here are some buildings, other buildings here. Here's the hotel you can see right here. Here's Tiberias. The Sea of Galilee can be such a peaceful, beautiful little place. One of the most beautiful places in all of Israel, I think, is the Sea of Galilee. Go down by the shore and just sit in the early morning hours is a wonderful experience. Of course, you read about the terrible storms that can come on the Sea of Galilee too. So both can happen. At Tiberias, there is an ancient synagogue that has been excavated. And on the floor of that ancient synagogue, here is a beautiful mosaic that has been uncovered. Okay, now we're going to talk about the Sea of Galilee. This is what it looks like. It's, almost a triangular shape. And it can be divided into these 4 quadrants. Sea of Galilee. It's also known as the Sea or the Lake Kinneret. Kinneret. Sometimes spelled Chinneret in some of our Bibles. And most Americans mispronounce that as Chinnereth. But that's Kinneret. Because Kinneret is the Hebrew word for a harp. Now take a look at that shape of that sea again. Does that look a little bit like it's shaped like a harp? Okay, that's where that name comes from, because the harp shape of that body of water. Kinneret. It's also known as the Sea or the Lake of Tiberias, which we talked about already. Okay, the sea is 13 miles long and up to 8 miles wide. So it's not huge, but it's a pretty good sized body of water. And it starts at 692 feet below sea level. So it's already pretty low. When it starts out, it's the lowest freshwater lake on the earth. Yeah. So when you're going down to the Sea of Galilee, you can, your ears will pop a little bit same when we come up out of that low level. Now, from the Sea of Galilee, of course, the lower Jordan runs downhill to the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is even lower than this, but you're already at 692 below sea level. It is the main water source. Its main water source is the Jordan River, but it's also fed by a number of underground springs, which plays an important part of another city we'll talk about called Tabgha. But Jordan River is the main water source. It's got lots of fish in it. Prominent in the New Testament narrative, many of Jesus's disciples were fishermen on the Sea of Galilee. And there are still lots of fish today. There's lots of fishing that goes on in the Sea of Galilee today. So these fish from the Sea of Galilee were famous throughout the Roman Empire. And it produced a flourishing export trade. And even today at restaurants all around the Sea of Galilee, you can have what's known as St. Peter's fish. But there have been discovered ancient amphora, which are jars with two handles, the amphora means, with a kind of a fish sauce that was made in Galilee and exported all through the Roman Empire. So you think about Peter. I've heard pastors, preachers sometimes refer to Peter as the simple Galilean fisherman. There probably wasn't anything simple about Peter. Peter, from the evidence we have, had a fairly large fleet of boats on the Sea of Galilee. We would think of him more like an entrepreneur or a businessman. Yes, he was a fisherman himself. He went out, but he was probably in charge of a number of fishermen, had a fairly well-to-do business, and probably did business with merchants from all through the Roman Empire that would come. One of the questions comes about Jews in the first century. Did they speak Hebrew, or did they speak Aramaic, or did they speak Greek? And this becomes quite a debate. And the simple answer to that question is yes.
All of them.
All of them. You know, from our American perspective, we're all mostly monolingual, you know. But in that part of the world at that time, people were multilingual. They had to be. The Roman Empire was vast, and it encompassed many regions with people who spoke different languages. And if you were in business, especially in an importing or exporting business, you had to know a number of languages. So Peter could get along well in Hebrew, in Aramaic, and in Greek, and probably some Latin. So it's much like many people in Europe today or in Africa. Many of these people have to be multilingual. It's just that, you know, we dumb Americans just can't fathom that, because we've got our language and we think everybody should speak our language. But okay, so fish, lots of fish in the Sea of Galilee. Number 5, its location in the depths of the Jordan Rift and surrounded by hills renders it liable to atmospheric downdrafts and sudden storms. So because of the weather phenomenon and the changes in atmospheric pressure result in these downdrafts coming down these steep mountainsides, hitting that body of water and producing these massive waves. And you can read about that, of course, in the New Testament, as Jesus calmed the storm. So here is the Sea of Galilee. That's the shape of it. The northeast quadrant, known as Galantus, we have Bethsaida, and the Jordan enters in this northeast quadrant. And the biblical story of the demoniac of Gadara occurred in this section. We move to the southeast quadrant. This was known as the Decapolis, and is part of what's known as the Golan Heights. You have the Golan Plateau. You have the city of Hippos, also known as Susita. And Hippos is the Greek word for a horse. Susita come from the Hebrew word for horse, sus. But it's a city that is built on this tall, thin mountain. It almost looks like something you'd see in a Dr. Seuss book. I mean, it's a weird, tall, skinny mountain and a city right on top of it. And it might have been the city that Jesus had in mind when he said, "A city set on a hilltop cannot be hidden." That's down here. Hippos is just about halfway down through this area. And the Gadara Harbor is there. Moving over to the southwest quadrant, city of Tiberias, which we just talked about. And the outlet for the Jordan River comes out here. And the baptism site is just below this outlet, right down here. Nice baptism. This is not where Jesus was baptized, but it's a nice spot. It's probably the best site for baptism. It's got the cleanest water, nice, fairly deep flowing water. The site of Jesus' baptism is down closer to the Jordan River, and a lot of not very nice, not very clean water, and not flowing very, very strongly. Northwest corner is probably the most important quarter for what we read about in the New Testament. So we have Capernaum, which was the headquarters of Jesus. We have the feeding of the 5,000 up in here, and the city of Gennesaret, which today is called Ginosar, very close to Gennesaret. Gennesaret is the New Testament. Ginosar today is where the Jesus boat is housed, which we'll talk about when we get to that point. But it was a very ancient boat from the time of Jesus. It was discovered in recent times and brought up. Here's a boat on the Sea of Galilee. You can see the steep cliffs surrounding it because it's down in that Jordan Rift Valley. And there's probably a tourist boat. Looks like an old fishing boat. Here's a couple of fishermen, actual fishermen in modern times. Out, they've got their little boat and their fishing nets. Here's our tour group taking a boat ride out on the Sea of Galilee. So this class has a final exam. Final exam is on the day we take our boat ride out on the Sea of Galilee. You climb out over the side and see if you can walk on water. If you make it to the shore, you get an A.
Pass or fail, yeah.
If you don't, you fail. Okay. All right. Mount of Beatitudes. So the Beatitudes, part of the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount took place on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. And the traditional site of the giving of that sermon is at this place that is known as the Mount of Beatitudes. Now, is that the actual place where Jesus gave the sermon? Well, we can't be certain, but it's somewhere in this area. And this is as good a guess as anyone. It has traditionally been claimed to be the actual site. So we know it's close, and it may be the actual site. And it's actually referred to a number of times in the Gospels as just simply the mountain. It was a place where Jesus frequently met with his disciples. Jesus, as far as his disciples were concerned, Jesus was a rabbi. He was their rabbi, and he held school with them. So where did they meet? Well, they met outdoors. The kind of teaching that Jesus engaged in is called peripatetic, coming from the Greek word peripateo, to walk around. So the teacher would walk around with his students and oftentimes take examples from nature, from things they saw. So Jesus said, a sower went out to sow, and he sowed his seed. Some fell by the wayside, and the birds of the air came and ate them up. Others fell on rocky ground where they didn't have much soil. They sprouted up as soon as the sun was risen. It withered, died. Others fell among the thorns, and the thorns choked them out. Others fell on good soil, and they produced some 10, some 50, some 100-fold. So using examples from nature to augment the teaching, this is what a peripatetic teacher did. And so he customarily met out of doors. So this mountainside was a common place where he met. So the Mount of Beatitudes is the traditional side of the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 through 7, located on the west shore, and we should say actually the northwest shore of the Sea of Galilee, between Capernaum and Tabgha. Talk about Tabgha next. But there is a Catholic chapel that was built there in 1939 by the Franciscan sisters with the help of the Italian ruler Mussolini. So Mussolini is kind of infamous, but he helped build this little chapel there. And it's a beautiful little chapel, and we'll get a chance to see it when we are there at the Mount of Beatitudes. Here's some pictures of the Mount of Beatitudes as you see it. And you can imagine, the shore down here, gently rising slope, and maybe a Jewish rabbi eating with his disciples and giving them a lecture about the ways of God. There's a picture of that chapel we just mentioned, and again the gently rising sloping hillside here. Another picture of the chapel.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it is beautiful. Okay, Tabgha. Tabgha is nearby. It's also in this northwest quadrant of the Sea of Galilee. Tabgha, and this got erased from your notes, but it just says miles west of Capernaum. It's about 1.25 miles west of Capernaum on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. I just discovered that today. So I had an old copy of this booklet that was in PDF format, and I needed to edit some things. So I had to convert it to Word, and the converting to Word, it got all messed up, and I had to redo a bunch of stuff. Anyway, a few things got mixed up, and one of them was this part of it got eliminated. But it's about a 1.25 miles west of Capernaum on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. Now, the ancient Greek name for Tabgha was Heptapegon, or Eptapegon. Epta means 7, and Pega means a spring of water. So Eptapegon means 7 springs. And this was one of the sources of water for the Sea of Galilee, with these 7 springs of water. Now, today, only 6 of those springs have been discovered. Maybe one of them has since dried up. We just don't know. But we know about 6 of them. But the name Eptapegon became corrupted over time into Tabgha. So the T from the T here in Epta, and the B, Arabs cannot pronounce the letter P. It comes out as B. So as this came over into Arabic, that you got the T and the B and the G there and the Ga. So Eptapegon became Tabgha. But Tabgha means 7 springs. Comes from this Greek. So this is a site that has a number of connections in the New Testament. So you have the calling of Peter, Andrew, James, and John taking place here. Matthew chapter 4, verses 18 to 22. The feeding of the 5,000, and this becomes a theme of this chapel that's built there. So as he multiplied the bread and the fish and fed 5,000. Mark 6:30 to 44. Jesus' post-resurrection breakfast with the disciples. After he rose from the dead, he appeared to his disciples there. They'd been out fishing, and they hadn't caught much, and he invites them in. He cooks fish for them. The Church of the Miracles of the Loaves and Fishes. Okay, that's that chapel that's there. The first church here, built in a Syrian style around the year 350. First time a church was built there that we know of. That church was replaced by Byzantine church. Remember now, the Byzantines, what happens to the Roman Empire after they become Christian? So in the 300s, Constantine becomes emperor of the Roman Empire. He accepts Christianity. Now we have the Byzantine era, Roman Christian. So a church was built there, Byzantine style, around 450. That church was destroyed by the Persian invasion of 614. This is the second Persian period. There was a first Persian period in the intertestamental era, a second Persian period in the 7th century as the Persians move in from the east. Then Byzantine ruins and mosaics were discovered there in 1932, and a provisional church was constructed. Present church was built in 1982, incorporating the ancient foundations and mosaics. Those ancient mosaics are still there. You can go into the church if they're not holding a service, and the area is roped off, but you can see those ancient mosaics from earlier. Okay, Tabqa, let's see. There's Tabqa, aerial view, Sea of Galilee in the foreground. That chapel is like right in here. And this is a beautiful place to go down by the seashore and collect seashells, little tiny seashells. And we may get a chance to do that. Here's a picture of the chapel. And there's that beach where you can get the seashells. Here's the mosaic floor in the chapel, commemorating the loaves and the fishes. Okay, so there's a basket full of remains, and the 2 fish. And here's a couple of our tour members down there on that beach. These rocks are out here just for a rough little pier, so you could bring a fishing boat in and stop there and get out on those rocks and walk ashore. Probably been there for centuries. Okay, we're going to talk about Capernaum, continuing on up around the shore of the Sea of Galilee. We come to the very important city of Capernaum. Capernaum became a headquarters of Jesus's Galilean ministry. So Galilee is up in the northern part of the land of Israel, and Jesus is, of course, born in Bethlehem down in Judea in the south, but his parents, Mary and Joseph, mother Mary, stepfather Joseph, were actually from Nazareth, which is up in Galilee. But Nazareth is not on the Sea of Galilee. It's separated from the Sea of Galilee by, there's a little kind of mountain range in between. So Jesus went from Nazareth over to Galilee, and he settled there in Capernaum. We're going to talk about Capernaum. So it was, the name Capernaum may come from the Hebrew for tomb of Nahum. So Kap or kafar actually means a tomb. Now, in Hebrew, the PH sound, like our F, and the P sound are the same letter. Okay, the only difference is it either has a dot in the middle of it or not a dot. So, kaper from kafer, tomb. And then Nahum is Hebrew, Nahum, Nahum. Kafar Nahum would be the tomb of Nahum. Now that's debated whether that's the source of this town's name. There's never been discovered a tomb of the prophet Nahum there. It may have been named for that. It's located on the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee. It's been a viable city from the 2nd century BC all the way until the Arab invasion of the 4th century AD. Okay, so from a couple hundred years before the birth of Christ, it had been a viable city. So it was very well established city by the time that Jesus came to it. Both Jews and Jewish Christians coexisted in Capernaum as late as AD 400, according to Egeria, a nun who visited between 381 and 384. We mentioned her before. She was that nun that visited the Holy Land, kept a diary of her dwellings, and We talked also about how further to the south in this Byzantine era, the Jews and the Byzantine Christians didn't get along. And there had been a massacre of Jews. But here in Galilee, things were different. Things were much more pleasant in relations between Jews and Christians. And so Egeria gave testimony to the fact they were living side by side, coexisting peaceably as late as AD 400. Now, when we think about Capernaum in the Bible, notice all these points. And this is a very important New Testament city. It was the home of Peter and Andrew. It was visited by Jesus after the wedding at Cana in John 2, where he performed his first miracle. It was the home of the nobleman who went to Jesus to have his son healed. And Jesus told him to go, his son was healed. John chapter 4 was the headquarters of Christ's Galilean ministry. There are a number of references to that. There was a God-fearing Roman centurion. Okay, so a Gentile Roman centurion. Centurion was head of 100 soldiers. Okay, the cent part of centurion means 100. Okay, 100 soldiers under him. He lived there in Capernaum, and he built a synagogue for the Jews. So this Gentile Roman was a big friend of the Jews. Point F, Jesus ministered in the synagogue there. We'll have some things to say about the synagogue in Capernaum. And we will see that synagogue when we're there. Point G, Peter's mother-in-law was healed. Matthew, the tax collector, had his office in Capernaum. The author of the first gospel. The discourse on the bread of life in John chapter 6 took place in Capernaum. Various healings were performed there. The story of the shekel and the fish. Remember, the tax collector came and asked Peter, does your teacher pay the tax? And Peter went and asked Jesus, and Jesus said, well, go down and throw a fishing line into the sea. And when you pull out a fish, look in its mouth. And he did, and there was enough money to pay for Jesus's tax and Peter's tax. That happened in Capernaum. L, dispute over whom was greatest happened in Capernaum, according to Mark 9:33-37. This debate seems to have happened on more than one occasion, by the way. There was another time as they were making their way up towards Jerusalem when that happened. And this is one of the three cities that was condemned by Christ. So Capernaum, Bethsaida, and Chorazin. Woe to you, Bethsaida. Woe to you, Chorazin. Woe to you, Capernaum. If the miracles that were done in you were done in Sodom and Gomorrah, they would have repented in sackcloth and ashes. But they did not repent. So here Jesus, can you imagine having Jesus living in your own city? The inhabitants of Capernaum saw so many marvelous things, but they didn't really turn to Christ. And so he condemned that city. Okay, there's a synagogue in Capernaum. The original synagogue was probably built in the 1st century AD. So maybe it may have been a brand new building when Jesus went and taught in it. The present synagogue that's there, at least the ruins of it, was built about AD 300. So it's a 4th century synagogue building, maybe even later. But it sits on the foundation of the 1st century synagogue. And you can still see in that building walls from the 1st century synagogue preserved up to 3 feet high. So it may have been that the original synagogue was destroyed by an earthquake. There are a lot of earthquakes in that region, but there were still 3 feet of wall standing. So they just built on top of it. So they rebuilt the new synagogue in the 300s. So we'll be able to see those walls. We'll be looking at the walls that were there when Jesus taught in that synagogue, that part of it. and the entire western wall still exists. Now, also in Capernaum, one of the sites to see is the house of Peter. So remember, it talks about they went into the house and Peter's mother-in-law had a headache and Jesus healed her. So where is that house? Well, we know where that house is. And this has been discovered, pretty good evidence that we have the actual site. And this is it. In the excavations at Capernaum, one residence stood out from the others due to early 3rd century Christian graffiti and a 4th century house church built above it. No, say, okay, well, big deal. 3rd century and 4th century, that's a long time after Christ, right? Okay, well, hold on. In the 5th century, a large octagonal Byzantine church was built above this, complete with a baptistry. Okay, it's even later, 5th century. The Byzantines used octagonal buildings as memorials to significant saints. So at least by this time, the Byzantines believed that this was a site of historical importance. That much we know because of the octagonal building that's built there. Now, pilgrims referred to the Byzantine church as the house of the Apostle Peter. So there seems to have been some tradition that was carried forth for several centuries that this was the house of Peter. Now, further excavations have actually uncovered pottery that is not normal household pottery, but pottery that would have been used for sacred purposes that go back to the 1st century. So there's pretty good evidence supporting this being the actual house of Peter. And we'll get to see that. It's quite interesting. And Capernaum. Here's an aerial view of Capernaum.
So the gray building is new?
This building here in the forefront, yeah, I think that's new. In fact, that might be, this is the synagogue over here, just to the right of that. And I think this is the house of Peter,
Oh, okay.
where they built over the top of it. They actually built archways over the top of it and built on top of it to preserve the ancient stuff below. And this has been built up since this picture was taken. Here's another picture of the synagogue. The interior, you can see steps going up and then entering in. This side here faces south. Or no, this is west, this is east. Anyway, the entrance would face towards Jerusalem. This is this is down underneath at the house of Peter. And what we're looking at here may be from the 1st century. Back to the Capernaum synagogue. So there would have been an upper level and a lower level. In these ancient synagogues, the ladies sat above and the men sat below. So you didn't sit together. One of the reasons for that is that a woman in her menstrual period is unclean and so shouldn't come in contact with men. And since you don't know when a lady's going to start, they just kept them separate in the synagogues.
But they could be with the other women?
Mm-hmm.
I thought they were just totally.
Yeah, but they could be with the other women. Okay, Chorazin. If we go north,
Question.
Yeah.
Sorry. So in the passages where Jesus is in the synagogue at Capernaum, like afterwards they take him out and want to throw him off a cliff. Do we know kind of where?
Okay,
around?
so the incident you're thinking of actually happened in Nazareth.
Oh, okay.
And there's a traditional site for that cliff that's probably not authentic.
Oh, okay.
Because too far away from the New Testament Nazareth.
Mhm.
But there is an interesting site, and from that site, it's probably not authentic. You have a wonderful view of the Jezreel Valley, looking all the way across to Megiddo.
Mhm.
Now, Chorazin is an amazing site. It's one of the cities that was condemned by Jesus. We know Jesus was there. We know he did miracles there and preached there. There is an ancient synagogue there also. Notice the dark color of these stones. One of the things that makes Chorazin somewhat unique is that the stones here are basalt. Most of Israel has loads and loads of limestone. Limestone is fairly soft. It's easy to carve. Basalt is volcanic rock, and it's very hard. So we're moving further north up in the direction of Mount Hermon, which is an ancient volcano, getting more basalt rock here. And in Chorazin, you see a lot of this basalt rock. Let's read a little bit about Chorazin, also called Chorazim. The I-N is the plural ending in Aramaic. I-M is the plural ending in Hebrew. That's why you find this switch back and forth sometimes with New Testament names, like the Sanhedrin, Sanhedrim, the same thing. It's just either Aramaic or Hebrew. The city of Chorazin was identified with the city Karazeh. That was the modern name of the city, 2.5 miles north of Capernaum. Remember, Capernaum's down on the Sea of Galilee, 600 some odd feet below sea level, and you start going north, and immediately you're going to go uphill. You're going to go way uphill. And so we're 2.5 miles. First established in the 1st century BC, it is one of 3 cities condemned by Christ. It was in ruins by the 4th century. So is this a result of Christ's condemnation of the city, that then it came to ruins? Maybe so. It was rebuilt in the late 5th and early 6th centuries. It was destroyed again in the 8th century. It was renewed in the 13th century and occupied continuously from then until the early 20th century. So, Chorazin is home to a 2nd century synagogue. Now we know there was a synagogue there in Jesus' day because he taught there. So all we have is clear-cut evidence of a synagogue from the 2nd century. Presumably it would be built on the foundation of the 1st century synagogue and have the same layout. It's a basilica shape, consisting of 3 hallways separated by 2 rows of pillars. There are doorways. The central one is the largest. This should say 3 doorways. 3 doorways, the central one being the largest. There is in this synagogue, very interesting, you'll see it when we're there, a seat of Moses. Now, Jesus talked about those who sit in the seat of Moses. There were the teachers in the synagogues who gave the lesson from the Torah. So it's called the seat of Moses. And there's a seat of Moses constructed all out of basalt that was dedicated and is there. Carved from a single block of basalt. The chair was where the reader of the Torah sat. The Aramaic inscription on the seat reads, "May Judah, son of Ishmael, who made this hall and its staircase be remembered for good. As his reward, may he have a share with the righteous." So we'll see that when we are there. In the synagogue, there are 2 readings. There's a reading from the Torah, coming from the first 5 books. And then accompanying that is a reading usually from the prophets, called the Haftarah. So there would be a seat of Moses, and there would be a seat for the reading of the Nevi'im, the prophets. Okay, so that is Chorazin. There's the synagogue. These smooth stones are reconstruction. The rough stones, like you see here, this was over the doorways. And you can see that's all rough stone, but that's original. Back in the back of the synagogue, you can see original stones. The staircase, the lower part is original. They had to reconstruct the top part. Here's inside this. You can see the 2 rows of pillars with 3 hallways. It's that basilica structure. This is interesting, and this was carved into one of the pillars, the head of Medusa. What is this Greek god figure doing in a Jewish synagogue? Well, many synagogues had these types of decorations. Many of them were defaced during stricter times of enforcement of Jewish laws, but this one may have survived defacement because the synagogue was destroyed by an earthquake. There's actually a well-known synagogue in central Israel I think from the 3rd century that has a horoscope in it. Yeah. So, people decorated their buildings. Whatever was the fad at the time, they just made that a decoration. So it's there's some strange things you see. Here's the seat of Moses and the inscription in Aramaic on it. Here's an old house. So you can see it built out of stone, no mortar. Those stones still stand after a couple thousand years in this earthquake-prone region. Look at this beautifully built archway that has held up all this time. This is one of our tour groups who took over there. This is known as the House of Arches, as you can see why. We're inside, and you can go into this house, even though it doesn't have a roof, on a hot summer day, and it's still cool.
Oh, sure, all that stone.
Yeah, all that stone. And on a cold winter day, it's not as cold as outside. The stones keep the heat.
Stone.
Gergasa. Okay, let's see where we're. Oh, we were going to stop with Capernaum. I already got to start on next week's lecture. Okay, we'll stop. Oh, okay, let's stop here. And let's see here. Should we try our song one more time?
Yes.
Okay, I think we should. Here are the words, and you've got the words. What's that?
There you go.
So let's see.
Make it
Yeah,
info,
I'm still presenting, so our online folks this time can see the words right here. This is Hinemato, and this is from Psalm 133, verse 1. Get the recording up here.
La 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 la
Where are we getting those sounds? La 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 la. Hine matov, hine matov. La 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 la.
All right. Okay, any questions before we close tonight?
Put your hand up.
What about the stuff going on in Iran right now?
Okay,
That's a good
talk
one.
about that briefly. In the Middle East, you never know what's going to happen next. So there are things going on in Iran right now. Is that going to impact our tour? Maybe, maybe not. Our tour is a month away. That is like an eternity in the Middle East. So we just don't know. Things could be perfectly peaceful now and have the same prospects for problem a month from today. So we don't know. So what's going on in Iran? I don't know if anybody knows, and I've been trying to follow it. I'm sure you've been watching the news and reading up on it too. President Trump has said he's going to do something to help the protesters. The Shah's son, Prince Pahlavi, is eager to move in if the Ayatollahs can be gotten rid of, and he has a plan for a transitional government there. Whether that will succeed or not is anybody's guess. And there are probably people high up in the military that have a better idea than any of us could possibly have, but we just don't know. But I would, if I were you, I would be very much in prayer for the situation in Iran. The Iranian people are suffering terribly. And if you ask me my opinion, it's time for the mullahs to go. We should have gotten rid of them a long time ago. I remember very well the Iranian Revolution and the taking of the American hostages in the American embassy there in Tehran. And they were there for, 444 days. Finally released the day of President Reagan's inauguration.
Yeah.
That was a happy day when they got to come home. But, the people of Iran, they went along with that Islamic revolution because they promised the people all kinds of wonderful things. And now, a generation later, they realize that was a raw deal. So we're praying and hoping that things will turn around and be good for the Iranian people. But nobody knows. You don't know. I don't know. I don't think President Trump knows. God knows. If our tour, for any reason, gets canceled due to some kind of an upheaval in the Middle East, everybody gets their funds refunded, and we just try to reschedule it or something. But I wouldn't be thinking that that's going to happen. I don't think anything is going to come of it, but who knows? The fact that there's trouble in Iran today doesn't mean that Israel is going to be in trouble a month from today. So I don't know if that answers your question or not. There's really no way to give a clear-cut answer, but there's just a lot going on, and God is in control, and we're in God's hands, and we won't go if it's unsafe. If it's safe, we will go. So we're going. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that did. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. Anybody else?
Me. I have a question.
Yes, Anna.
Actually, I have 3 questions.
Okay.
First of all, I was going to print out the booklet, but is there a way we can go by the Bible College and pick up a couple copies?
You come by, I'll print out a copy for you.
Oh, okay.
Sweet.
And then I was wondering, are the notes that we saw tonight, are they in the booklets?
The notes I was reading is the booklet. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
PowerPoint is separate from the booklet, but the notes are in the booklet.
Okay.
If you wanted to, you could just download that file onto your phone, and you'd have it right there with you all the time.
Oh, let's do that.
Yeah, better idea.
Okay. So I was wondering if you recommended any movies or had a list of movies that we could watch. We're watching The Masada right now. It's very interesting.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's I think it's 6 hours long,
I think it's 8 hours
or
long.
maybe 8.
Okay, with
We can only watch 2 hours a night. Ugh.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
very good.
Yeah, there's a lot of good movies out there, and there's a lot of good stuff on YouTube, shorter videos. There's a channel that I really like called Israel My Channel, and the fellow who has that, he's got a lot of stuff that's contemporary, but also a lot of it's tied in with the Bible and the land of Israel. He does a fantastic job with the graphics. It's called Israel My Channel.
Is
I
that
forget-
on YouTube?
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
Okay.
And I forget his name, but he's actually in Poland, and he's a missionary there with Friends of Israel, which is an excellent organization. And he's got some tremendous stuff. Trying to think. I'll try to come up with some other links for you for things that you can look at online.
Okay, that'd be great because it's fun to get a real feel of the places we'll visit. And
Yeah.
that Masada is a fascinating
It's an interesting story.
little
It
mountain.
certainly is. I had actually a couple of videos I was going to show last week, and I forgot to. I ran out of time. Let me see if I go back here to. I think I put them up here. Yeah. Okay, let me share the screen again so you can see this. Israel's location in the Middle East. We're early. Let me just do these. These are both pretty good. So there's the URL here is www.youtube.com, and that's all this stuff right here. But let me just play this real quick.
Okay.
Why don't we get those out?
Maybe it hasn't started yet.
We're not able to hear the sound.
Oh, you can't hear the sound? Why is that?
It's a good question.
Well, let me.
I love you. Well, what, you don't remember either. You say something. I don't think you told me.
There's probably a setting in this. Oh, maybe it's here. I have a thought. Oh, yeah. Okay, this is going to take more trouble than I want to take right now. I'll see if I can play these next week for you, okay?
Now we're not seeing you live, Dr. Gunn. We've lost you, Dr. Gunn. We've lost you, Dr. Gunn. We're still waiting to see if you can activate your screen, Dr. Gunn. I see you waving.
Houston, we have a problem.
Yeah, I just sent a text over to my brother, see if he could let him know.
Maybe there's a technology problem.
Yeah.
What time is it? Okay.
Shabbat shalom. I think we're going to give it up.
Yes, sir.